Let's get started. This session today is about what in-house and outside counsel need to know about AI contract review, a very hot topic out there. Both customers of ours and folks that we talk to in the legal field on a day-to-day basis are always asking us questions about this. Let's get started. So thank you everyone for joining. I am Dorna Moini. I'm the CEO of Gavel, and I practiced law for nearly a decade, last at Sidley Austin. And then I started Gavel several years ago. And so, as some of you may know, Gavel's genesis is in rules-based document and workflow automation, which is still one of our biggest products, Gavel Workflows. But this year, we launched Gavel Exec, which is a way to handle everything after that first draft through a very precise, high-quality AI product that really understands how you guys as lawyers work. My whole career has been shaped by this mix of legal work and building systems that really supercharge lawyers. And as you're going to see today, this is not just about saving time or efficiency, which definitely AI does provide, but it's really about building systems and using data that helps you make better decisions and draft better documents. I have with me as my co-host here are Gavel's CTO, Pierre Martin. Pierre is a longtime software developer, really knows the ins and outs of the technical side. So I'm excited to learn a little bit from him as well today. But he previously grew another company, Beacon, from 0 to 250 million as the founding CTO. He has a PhD in computer engineering, and he was the founder of Amazon Video Live and Microsoft Research. So really someone who understands the technical aspects very, very well. Now, today we're going to be talking about AI contract review, how to evaluate AI tools, how in-house teams and law firms are working together using AI tools, which I think is actually one of the least commonly discussed topics that we see out there. And then how do these AI agents work for contract review? And what is the future of agentic practice of law, which, as we all have heard, the word agents is very popular and we've been talking about a lot, but let's talk about what it actually does and what's the future. All right, before we dive into these topics, I want to sort of zoom out for a second. So what's happening with AI isn't just a nice new tool. We're really living through what a lot of economists are calling the fifth industrial revolution. First was steam, then we had electricity, then computation, then the mobile internet. And each one of these reshaped the economy, not because people were adopting the technology overnight, but because the technology really quietly rewired a lot of the cost structures and a lot of the workflows that exist in organizations across the world. And what we're seeing now with AI feels very much the same. So tasks that used to take an hour now take minutes. Work that required a human gatekeeper can suddenly be automated a lot more reliably and done better. And there's always a lag, obviously. So my favorite example of this, going back to these prior industrial revolutions, is Henry Ford. Electricity was invented in the 1870s, but the Ford factory didn't actually run on electricity until 83 years later. So that's how long it took for a major industrial player to actually reorganize around this new capability. And that is actually sort of one of the dangers now, because the adoption is happening so much more rapidly in each industrial revolution that you go through forward, that the status quo really is the least safe option for a lot of legal organizations. And I think this is something that's definitely on everyone's mind here. And that's probably why you're here. So one of the questions I want you to really be asking yourselves is, what does it mean to be an AI native organization instead of an AI adjacent organization? It's not just about buying a tool, but it's about really reorganizing the work so that AI isn't a bolt-on, but it's part of your operating model. So with that in mind, let's talk about this particular topic, AI contract review. What are the areas that we're seeing this in most commonly? What are the different types of AI contract review? How do they differ from rules-based automation, and where are there some similarities that really overlap? So the first category is rules-based. So rules-based automation is the most controlled and predictable category. So we have very, very clearly rules-based automation, like what we have with Gavel workflows, which we're not really talking about as much today, but it is not really a generative AI tool. There's some AI onboarding, but you're setting up rules that every single time a trigger is met, the exact same piece of text is going to be entered inside of your document. Now, another version of this rules-based methodology is playbooks. And for those of you who've used Gavel Exec, I'll show a little demo of it in a moment, but playbooks are an example of how you can use rules-based automation along with generative AI. You're able to set up a bunch of rules that are standard for you, that check what you're willing to accept and what you're not willing to accept. And then the AI can determine, was this rule met, and how exactly should we change it to make sure that your document conforms with your standards inside of your organization. So that's rules-based. Second category here is just pure generative AI with no rules, where some of the judgment comes in. So this is where the generative AI isn't following fixed rules. It's just reading the contract like a lawyer and making decisions based on context, whether that context is the context that Gavel has provided. We have a system that is very well aware of what benchmarks are, what standard market terms are in a variety of different corporate legal areas and contract types. But it could be based on that. It could also be based on your own documents. So if you've given it a ton of context of what are all the documents that you've ever negotiated, it can, without you setting any rules, analyze those documents and make decisions or suggestions for you that you can accept or reject. And then the third category here is AI agents. So these are multi-step workflows, and Pierre is going to talk in more detail about some of these as well. But this is where we are breaking up a task into steps. So as an example, extract the terms, compare it to a playbook, rank those risks, draft fallback provisions, summarize it, prepare negotiation notes, forward it on to another party. You're taking on a much larger workflow. And these are definitely pieces that you'll continue to see integrated within Gavel Exec more and more as we're making really rapid additions to the platform in the coming weeks, days, months, and so forth. All right, so I wanted to show you an example of how these rules-based plus generative AI systems work. And I've created a little video that I'm going to voice over for you. So we have Gavel playbooks inside of Gavel Exec, and you can either create your own playbooks or one of the ones that already exist. And as you can see, these playbooks have a bunch of very clearly defined rules. You can go over to the top and run that playbook. And when that playbook is run, it's going to analyze your document and say what's met, what isn't met. So as you can see, you have some red X's. That means this is not met. This condition that you've set is not met. It tells you why exactly that rule failed. And then it gives you several suggested changes that you can accept or reject or actually teach it to learn better on, and go exactly to that section in the document to make those changes directly. So these playbooks really help you get your entire organization on the same page about what you're willing to accept and not accept. And it also helps you even as an individual lawyer become consistent with your decision. So you have certain things that you are willing to accept and certain things that you are never willing to accept. And it's very good at picking up on all of those nuances. One of the places where we see the biggest compliments on Gavel Exec is that the changes are actually ones that you want to accept. And as you can see, you can also create new rules. And then one of the features that's really important as we're thinking about how are two teams, in-house and outside counsel, working together is this sharing functionality. So I can go in here and share this playbook with either my entire organization, with just Pierre or certain people within my organization. I can give them read-only access so they can just run the playbook. I can give them full access so they can help collaborate with me on what actually are the rules inside of this playbook as well. The next thing, so with that in mind, is this aspect of being able to share between in-house and outside counsel has been very, very popular within Gavel Exec and within a lot of our customer base. because it's an opportunity for those two sides to build a stronger relationship and really start doing work together, even where there may not have been a relationship in the first place. So as an example, we have a lot of customers who represent a startup, law firm customers who represent startup customers of ours. And what they're doing is the law firm is creating a set playbook for the company to run on their MSAs or their vendor agreements or their NDAs or whatever that document type is that's really important to them that they're negotiating on a frequent basis. And so it's a lot of the law firm's expertise that is being provided on what's market, what's important. And then on the in-house side, they're able to use these standardized playbooks to reduce that turnaround time, to maintain a really good relationship with that law firm, and really be using the standards of the law firm on a consistent basis. And then you also have, I'll show in the next slide, you also have a lot of transparency on why some of these changes are being made directly inside of the platform. All right, so aside from just those general playbooks, which are more rules-based, I also want to show you some functionality that is more chat-based. So you can obviously run playbooks, but you can also negotiate documents with your own prompts. So there's also a free form section inside of Gavel Exec. I've asked it here to redline this agreement for a biotechnology company, which we have some data on. We have data on what's market in that industry. And as you can see, you can go through here and mark that you want to see only the high priority changes, the medium priority changes. And it has changes that it's making and explaining to you as to why you should make this modification to this document because of the fact that you are a biotechnology company, you're negotiating a vendor agreement with a software agreement. You can also, I've been going through these and just accepting individually because a lot of clients like to see what the change was before they insert it into the document, but you can also just apply all into your document and directly analyze it there or accept all. Another thing that you can do with the free form prompts is you can compare it to another document. You can compare it to multiple documents or you can compare it to a single document. So here I've dropped in another MSA that I have, and I'm asking it to conform this agreement to the terms in this attached MSA. And so when I run that, it's going to analyze those terms and it's going to tell me what should I change in this document that is not similar to what I had in my prior document. And I can look at whatever priority changes I want as I go through that. And then the final thing that a lot of our customers find really useful is summarizing what already exists in the document. So whether you're getting this from the opposing party, the counterparty, or whether you're just trying to explain your changes in an email to the counterparty, you can ask it to summarize those red lines and it's going to understand what is in track changes inside of your document. And you can go ahead and drag and drop this into an email that you then share with other members of your team, your clients, the counterparty, or whether if you're working with other departments like sales or procurement or HR, you can also share some of those changes with them as well. All right. The final thing I want to talk about before I pass this over to Pierre to give us all the intel about how these systems actually work is some of the biggest risks that we see in legal AI and how to mitigate these and some of the really high level important questions you should be asking. So one of the first questions that every legal team asks should be, where does my data go and who can see it? So a lot of LLM vendors have the same risk profile as any other legal tech vendor. And so a lot of the questions you're going to be asking are similar to what you would be asking even if there were no AI models involved. However, there's sort of this added wrinkle with AI, which is that the models can memorize data, and there's this external provider that is now that could potentially have access to some of these prompts that you're putting in or the documents that you're putting in. So the number one thing that I tell people you should be asking your vendors about is whether they have zero data retention with their AI models. So zero data retention, which Gavel Exec has with the LLMs that we engage in, means that the prompts, the documents, and the outputs are never stored and never entered into training pipelines by LLMs like OpenAI. And the standard, for example, for OpenAI is that they store that information for 30 days. If your vendor has zero data retention, they do not store that at all. So it's 0 days, 0 time. So if the vendor can't give you zero data retention, they really are not suitable for legal work that involves privileged and confidential material here. The second thing I often recommend is that you look for vendors who are model agnostic. So at Gavel, we are every day on a very regular basis, we're looking at, oh, what new model has come out? How can we benchmark it against what we already have in production for our customers? And is it an improvement on how it marks up documents, how it answers legal requests? So we have a lot of back-end data on that, and we're doing a lot of analysis on that to make sure that we always have the right model for you. So we're not tied to just being with OpenAI. If Grok or Claude comes out with something that's better, then we will switch that out for our customers, at least on the particular tasks that we think are best. So as an example, this week, I think it was this week, maybe it was last week, we switched out one of our tools for GPT 5.1, but we did not do that for all of the different tools. So for certain tasks, we're now using GPT 5.1, which we have benchmarked and found to be better at some of those tasks. And then, so third thing I want to mention here is training on your data. So you do not want your vendors to be training on your data, obviously, because that could go over to other customers, and that's your privileged and confidential information. However, you do want them to be able to train based on your data for you and your instance. And so that's something that's really important to us, is the more you use Gavel Exec, the better it gets. And then finally is this sort of rules-based components. It's important to have generative AI that can do anything, like you can with our chat function. You can give it a prompt to do almost anything, and that's becoming more and more robust on a day-to-day basis. But you also want to have the ability to encode rules, because while rules are, these playbooks that I'm sure many of you guys have been using for many years in many of your jobs, there's now a way to encode those playbooks and have AI read them, as opposed to starting from scratch every single time and not having those guardrails. All right, we'll have some time for Q&A at the end, but I want to pass it over to Pierre, and he's going to go over all of the nitty-gritty and details on how these models work and what us lawyers all need to know about.
All right, thank you, Dorna. I'm always super excited to tell you more about what we've been working on, how it works, and what's coming up. I already see in the chat there's questions about, how do you train your language model? What language model do you use? And it turns out the answer is it changes every day. As Dorna said, we just rolled out GPT 5.1 in some of our agents. We actually use a collection of lots of different models that are all optimized to perform the best at the specific task. And I'll start by saying that that's a hard question to answer, because pure large language models are just not enough for your contract work, right? What a large language model is, like GPT-5 or Claude 4.5 or Grok 3, everything that you've read in the news in the past few weeks, right? They're here to generate text. And the way they do that is they're trained to generate sentences, a sequence of words that statistically look like the corpus of data they've been trained on, right? So they ingested the entire internet, and they know how to complete a sentence, right? And it turns out it actually works pretty well for the standard contracts. That you could just go in ChatGPT here and say, generate me an NDA. Turns out there's a lot of NDAs out there on the public internet. It's capable of generating a sequence of words that statistically looks very much like an NDA, and it's pretty much correct. However, behind it, it just doesn't understand the structure of the NDA. It understands the sequence of words, but not the structure of an NDA. And so, as you know, as corporate lawyers, right, contracts requires structure and cross-references, right? Which means that you need a system that understands the document and the context of the document, not just the text, right? What this means is, even if you look at a simple NDA, right, you have a sequence of clauses, right? Clauses mean something. Clauses can be related to one another. There's also definitions. Clauses use definitions, right? And so, you can have an obligation of non-disclosure, which is related to a trigger for disclosure. And underneath, there's definition for what confidential information is in this contract, what the receiving party is, what the disclosing party is, right? And so what Gavel Exec does underneath is not just text generation, is first and foremost mapping out your contract and its sources and the whole context so it understands the relationship between clauses, definitions, triggers, and so on and so forth. So what we do is what we call reference-driven lawyering, right? And that's powered by a technology that's called retrieval augmented generation. Underneath it, right, it means that each clause and each definition in your document is turned into an embedding. Embedding is a word I'm sure you must have heard a few times now as generative AI is growing, especially in the text generation space. And what embedding really means is turning a word or a sequence of word, in fact, a clause or a definition, into a sequence of numbers that represent the meaning of that clause or definition in its context. So I'm going to generate a sequence of number that represents the word client, the word John Doe, the word disclosing party, the definition for confidential information. And in fact, as you may remember from high school math, when you have a sequence of number, you can actually create a representation of this number in a plane, like a vector, and see how close they are. And remember, those generations are done in context, right? So suddenly we know that in your documents, the definition of client and John Doe are very much related and close to one another because they mean the same thing in these documents. And we know that it's also closely related to the disclosing party because John Doe and the client may be a disclosing party, but it may not be the only disclosing party. We also know there is some relation to confidential information, but it's a concept that's fairly orthogonal. Now, we can do that with the document you've opened in Gavel Exec, but we can do that with all the other sources you want to add to your context. So you can add documents you attached. I'll show you how. You can create a project with all the documents that you want Gavel Exec to consider when you review certain types of contracts. And this actually makes our AI capable to reference your exact sources, not information that's publicly available on the internet, although it's also available to Gavel Exec, but your specific clauses and definitions and the relationship of these clauses and definitions to the new text that's being generated. So this is why, we say typically Gavel Exec is designed to beat GPT for lawyers, right? You might have heard this term, just I'm going to tweak GPT to make it work for lawyers. And we're just way beyond the concept of a large language model. We do use large language models and multiple of them, but really what makes the system work is this clause intelligence, our ability to map out your entire documented sources, clauses, definitions, triggers, and the relationships, and feed that to what we call a network of specialized agents coordinated by a work plan. So specialized agents means that they're AI agents that have been designed to perform a specific task, right? Summarizing a document, reviewing a whole document, explaining parts of the document, drafting a new clause or redlining an existing clause or adding a comment to the document are specific tasks. And we've created independent agents that are able to work together to complete a whole work plan given the prompt that you may give it. Just like a senior associate may just plan out work to review a contract. So when you think of reviewing a contract, what you're going to do, of course, is first review. Then you may want to just go draft a new clause and redline an existing clause to reference the new clause you just inserted. Then explain what you've done and add a comment for the opposing party. Right? This is exactly how Gavel Exec works. So let's see this in action for a second. So here I'm in context of a stock purchase agreement. So imagine as Gavel, we just raised a round of funding. We have purchasers. And so as I put it in Gavel Exec and I open Gavel Exec is going to map out all the clauses and definitions in this document. I can ask it specifically to reference all the clauses with important triggers. And as you ask this, you see that very quickly Gavel Exec will give you the full list of clauses that have a trigger. In fact, it's doing that with a reference. You can see those paragraph signs that you can quickly click through. So let's stop on termination here. You can see a preview of that clause of the reference it's making. Click it, be taken to the document. So you see that Gavel Exec actually has understood your clauses and the relationship and how they group together. You can see it also, it knows that it references section 4, 6, and 7, which are related to paragraph 811, right? So now I can use those references to ask Gavel Exec to make specific changes to those clauses, right? So when I look at the termination trigger, I'm going to ask Gavel Exec to update it to reduce the risks to the founders and directors of the company. And it's going to be able to do just that while respecting the existing definitions and clauses and references that exist in my own document. If I'm happy with it, I can click Apply All, and I can see that Gavel Exec is capable of adding, obviously, text to your document while respecting the existing clauses and references that are in your document. It works not only with your own document, but with sources. So for instance, I can add our information security policy document. It's going to map out its clauses too, and I can ask of Gavel Exec, well, just compare my stock purchase agreement and see if there's anything in conflict with my company's policies that are referenced in the information security policy document here. And so because we do this retrieval augmented generation, we're able to compare clauses and contrast those clauses between the two documents and see where things and terms and definitions may be mismatching. So in this case, Gavel Exec will point out with references once again which clauses may be in conflict. In fact, here it's going to rightfully point out that my document here has a too wide definition of information when it comes to inspection rights. And so I want my shareholders to be able to, of course, have access to information in the inspection rights clause, but it needs to have some carve out or protection for personal information because my security policy prevents me from, of course, divulging information and personal information about my customers. So our network of agents is optimized for accuracy. And so when we pick all these agents that are performing individual tasks, we benchmark them against human lawyers. So one of them, for instance, is contract redlining in corporate law. What we're going to do is ask a human lawyer to perform a specific task and ask Gavel Exec to perform the same. And over, we're going to compare the results of the AI to the results of the human lawyer and measure things like recall and precision. Recall means we're just measuring how often did Gavel Exec generate materially similar red lines as the human lawyer, right? We do that 90% of the times, which means that 90% of the times we will pick up the same clauses as a human lawyer would for editing, and we would make edits that look like the one of the human lawyer. Precision is interesting because it means how often did the human lawyer generate materially similar red lines as the AI. But it turns out Gavel Exec can generate more red lines than a human lawyer. Sometimes, because it's lower importance, maybe, a grammar check and something that you might not want to put in a red line if you choose not to. Sometimes, actually, we realized that it was able to pick up on inconsistencies that the human lawyer missed. Because, in fact, the AI has an unfair advantage, right? It has this perfect memory of all clauses in the documents and the sources. It is able to cross-reference really quickly, as we've seen. And our agents are specialized in individual tasks. So we see that with AI, in fact, you're enhancing your ability to actually not miss something that may be important in your contract and your sources. Now that we've talked about what makes this reference-driven agentic approach work, I also want to say that this is what's with the system actually makes us go at really high speed, right? This is how we're able to innovate and launch features really, really quickly within this framework of references, sources, and agents. So within the past 30 days, right, just what we've launched, well, we actually launched that UI that I showed you that allows you to see your references and click and go to that reference right away. We've allowed you to switch sources between projects, so you can actually start chatting in context of all your NDA documents, and then switch in context to your information policy documents to just switch context in which you're working within the same documents. You can now, we have agents that allow you to draft new clauses. Previously, more than a month ago, we could just redline existing clauses. We now have agents that allow summarizing existing red lines so you can understand the gist of what the opposing party put in their red lines. We allow you to specify your own preferences in legal areas, so we can tune our output to the legal area you've put in there. We've rolled deep reasoning by default, so some of our agents now are able to use reasoning. And in fact, we've done that while making chat 3 times faster in the past month. That's partly because we've continuously calibrating our agents and picking the latest models that make the task as accurate or more accurate and faster. We've rolled out GPT 5.1. So 5.1 was released just a few days ago. It's already out in a quarter for agents where it's performing better than previous models. We've actually increased the speed of our playbooks as well by improving the way we build the map of your documents. So we use a different vector technology that makes it faster. We added support for Chinese, and we now have a free tier, which we hope you all enjoy in the next, right after this webinar. So what's in Gavel for the future? Well, we want to keep iterating at this same speed, and there's a couple of axes that are driving our vision for the future, in the very near future, in fact. Data-driven or reference-driven lawyering is the most important piece of the puzzle for us, right? And so you're able to attach documents, you're able to create projects, but we want to extend the sources you can use within Gavel Exec very quickly. So we imagine that very soon you'll have the ability to pull your sources from Dropbox, iManage, and Outlook, so that Gavel Exec never misses an important detail. We're going to add exec on the web. So besides your application that's embedded into Microsoft Word, Word will give you the ability to review draft and review packets of multiple documents at once, right? Microsoft Word allows you to edit one document, but what if you wanted to edit a packet of 10 documents together? We're going to keep on extending our network of agents. So beyond the ones we already have, we're about to launch a commenting agent very soon, form fill, web search, and so on and so forth. We'll keep on listening to your needs to add agents that are specialized at individual tasks. And finally, we'll give you quick actions, but also the ability to create your own agent if you don't find one that works out of the box. So quick actions means without having a prompt, like I did in front of you here, you can actually have a one button click that would just redline or draft or benchmark a document. Or you can also create your own agent if you don't find in the list that you can reuse over and over by building your own agent library you can use within Gavel Exec. So I'm very excited for what the future has in store. I'm sure you have a lot of questions that we're excited to answer too. But before we conclude, I'm going to pass it back to Dorna.
Wonderful. Thank you, Pierre. So yes, one of the things that I wanted to share is that we have a limited time promotion that's going on right now for in-house teams, where you can get 50% off your first month when you sign up in November. And so if you do decide to sign up, you can use the code INHOUSE50 written on the screen here to get 50% off your first month.